Good afternoon, everyone. And we are continuing on to our second segment, and we are looking at the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And the reason being is that these two are always coupled together and quite tightly as well. As we begin, I would like to draw your attention to what we had discussed yesterday, and I would like to draw that picture again so that we all have the same perspective of the chronology of the scriptures. We know that much of everything begins here at the book of Genesis. I don't think any one of us disagree with that. And the next book being the book of Exodus. And somewhere in Exodus chapter 19, we find that there is Mount Sinai. Now, one of the things that we have discussed is that after Mount Sinai, there is another major milestone that I think all of us should bear in mind, which would be the return to the second temple. Now, we have an exile here. And one of the things that I had tried to point out to everyone is that in the time before the Exodus, we have Genesis 50 chapters, and we have Job 42 chapters. And none of these 90 over chapters speak about Israel. It doesn't speak about the festivals. They don't speak about the observance of the Sabbath. But we did notice that yesterday, the book of Genesis, right here in Genesis chapter 2, verses 2 and 3, talks about the Sabbath. And then at Mount Sinai, we are given the Sabbath laws. And that was where we are yesterday. Now today, when we look at the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, let me add to this table. We would have Passover, and we would have the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now, in these segments, you find that these do not occur before the Exodus. And so it is important for us to realize that there is a demarcation, that at the time of Adam, at the time of Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, we don't read of the Sabbath, Passover, and the feast. Even at the time of Job, which means that there is a very long period of time which was addressing general humanity as well. But until we came to Mount Sinai, things became more specific to the nation of Israel. And so let's bear this in mind, and we shall begin to look at some fundamentals which we did yesterday. The fundamental that I wanted to point out again today is this word seasons, which should be translated as appointment. A time to meet. That would be a better reason, a better translation, a better explanation for this word seasons. The reason being is very simple. When we read from Genesis all the way through, God is showing us who he is. And in verse 14, right here, that God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons. These are things that they can see for days and years. The idea is this, that when God put all these celestial bodies in place, God allowed mankind to understand how to count the days, count the months, count the month of the year. And that is important because God is a very detailed God. God is trying to tell the Israelites when they read this later on that when God gives them appointment dates, they are to keep. Because when they look up in the heavens, they will be able to determine the time of day, the day of month, and the month of year, such that they too will know exactly when God expects to see them in the tabernacle and in the temple. Now, that is important. Why? Because God is a specific God. When he gives instructions to his people, like Israel, he expects that to be kept. And it is not like our modern day, that I forgot the appointment. So we forget the doctor's appointment or the dentist's appointment. But when it comes to the scripture, when God makes an appointment with Israel, it is very specific and it is very serious. That would be the background that I wanted to point out to us. Now, for our remaining days of going through the feasts and festivals, let me draw your attention to Leviticus chapter 23. Again, we are not going through an exhaustive study, and I hope that this series of studies will spur you to go and check out all the verses that God has given throughout the scriptures with regards to the feasts as well as the appointments. And so let me explain this to you. Why is Leviticus 23 important? Because it is the summary headlines of everything that God has given to the people of Israel, the children of Israel. So when you read this, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, the feasts of the Lord you shall proclaim to be holy convocations. These are my feasts." Now, the word feast is a very, well, I guess it's not our regular word. I guess it's not our regular word. Reason being is that it's not an English word. And we need to understand it from the Hebrew context. So if you look at this, the feasts of the Lord, which you shall proclaim to be holy convocations. Now, holy convocations is a coming together, right? This would be more of an assembly. These are my feasts, and I would draw your attention to this important and serious point. The word feasts that is translated here is really appointments. Appointments. And using Genesis chapter 1 as that background, God is giving to the people, the children of Israel, not feasts to be happy and celebrate, but they are intentionally described as appointments. And I do not like this word, so I'm just going to strike it out for now. So think with me and remember that these are the appointments of the Lord. And these are holy appointments, special appointments. They are a special time for them to come together because these are appointments of God. What does appointments mean again? They are specific times to meet God, to do certain things. And these days or events are holy because they are special. Remember yesterday I mentioned to you, the Sabbath is a special day, a holy day, that it is different from the rest of the days. And same here, that these appointments are different from all other appointments. So when you read in verse 3, which we covered yesterday, 6 days work shall be done. seventh day is the Shabbat. It is a holy convocation. You get together, you mingle together, which is what the Jews do today. You shall do no work on it, and it is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. And in all your dwellings refer to your homes. And so they mingle at home, they go to the synagogue, but they don't do work. And that's why they're serious about defining work. Because Sabbath is a cessation of what you do in a regular way. And so the seventh day is also a rest day. So that was what we did yesterday. Verse 4 says this: these are the feasts of the Lord. Again, I strike this out. Appointments. And you know that when it's talked about as an appointment, it is a serious affair. You know, when God calls the children of Israel to meet, it is not an option. It is mandatory. And that is why you should appreciate that the Jews are very concerned about making sure this happens. And these are the more religious ones, right? And so it says that these are the holy convocations which you shall proclaim at their appointed times. Now, the word appointed times means the specific appointment times. God says, please come and see me. Just like the doctor saying, no, come and see me next week. We'll make an appointment and it will be on a Friday at 10 o'clock in the morning. And so if you don't show up, then nothing's going to happen. And if you show up at any other time, he won't be able to see you. So an appointment is a very serious affair, even in our lives today. And much more in Leviticus chapter 23. See, on the 14th day of the first month, see, they are very specific time. So you need to be able to count 14, know what is the first month. At twilight, which is normally at sunset, it is called the Lord's pesach. And this is the word, pesach. It's the Lord's pesach. Now, Passover may not be a good word to use, but we'll stay with it because that's the word that we all use. On the 15th day of the same month, right? Same month, this month, is the feast of unleavened bread to the Lord. Now, the name Feast of Unleavened Bread, again, this time around, we don't need to strike it out. Why? In verse 6, this is called feast is Hag. Unleavened bread is Ha Matzot, right? It's a feast of unleavened bread. And in this case, the word feast is literally a feast. In these cases, it is not. And so it's difficult for us to grapple initially, mainly because the English tends to misguide our learnings all over the years. And I urge you to check this out. Don't trust everything I say, and make sure that what I say is correct. So God says this is the feast of unleavened bread. And what is a feast? A feast is a festival. It is a getting together. And one of the interesting definition of a feast is that in the ancient Hebrew times, they would get together in a circle to jump and dance. And so in our modern day, we call it a celebration. Now, of course, a Chinese celebration or an Asian celebration, you sit around the table and you eat and drink. But in the ancient days, when God gave this to the nation of Israel, it is a hag. It means that it is a time for them to come together and they rejoice and they jump around and dance. And so that is called a hag, a feast. And they do that to the Lord, and it's called the Hamatzot. Matzah is unleavened bread. And then God gives rules. What rules? 7 days you eat unleavened bread. Then on the first day you get together, and then you don't do any normal work. And then you make offering by fire to the Lord. And this one, offering by fire, please go back and read Leviticus chapter 1. A burnt offering. And for 7 days you do it, and the seventh day, again, you come together and you don't do any work on it. And that's what we are going to cover. Now, remember, I said Leviticus 23 are the headlines for the appointments. And what is the Passover? Now, unfortunately, many of us do not study the text. And if you just read books on it, I'm afraid that we may miss out the details. So let me just briefly, because today is not a detailed study, just a brief study, because we have already done an Exodus 12 and 13 study early on in the period of March. So let me just quickly go to define the Passover. In Exodus chapter 8, Exodus chapter 8, reading from verse 25. This was a time when Moses spoke to Pharaoh, let my people go. And he didn't. And so plague after plague came. And in chapter 8, verse 25, then Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron. And he says, do this, go, sacrifice to your Elohim in the land. Understand this, your Elohim. In the land, and this would be Egypt. What was the original request? Was to go to the wilderness to sacrifice to God. All right. And now Pharaoh says, let me just change your terms of reference. Just go and sacrifice to your God, your Elohim, in the land of Mitzrayim, in the land of Egypt. Now, observe verse 26. And Moses said, it is not right to do so, for we would be sacrificing the, look at this word, abomination of the Egyptians to the Lord our God. If we sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians before their eyes, then the consequence is this, then will they not stone us? And this will be the background to the idea of the Passover. All right. And so let me just briefly explain this. At the time when Moses spoke to Pharaoh, and when Pharaoh says, go and sacrifice to your God in the land of Egypt, and Moses says, it is not right to sacrifice. Why? Because we would be sacrificing the abomination of the Egyptians. If we sacrifice the abomination of the Egyptians before their eyes, meaning they see the Israelites do that, will they not throw stones at us? Stone to kill. Now, what are they talking about? Now, every time you see the word abomination would be generally referring to idols, right? The idol or a god of the Egyptians. One of the things that we normally don't think about is that there is a peculiar god at that point in time which Moses referred to as the abomination of the Egyptians. This is a picture taken from the Egyptian Museum, and this is the abomination of the Egyptians. And he's got a name, and it's called Khnum. He has a goat head. or sometimes a ram head, and a human body. And he sits on a throne like this. And so this is Kanum. And basically what Moses is saying, how can we offer a goat or a ram or a sheep, right? A male goat, a male sheep. And if they do that, won't the Egyptians kill us? And the answer is yes. That was a rhetorical question, and the answer is yes. And that would be the background that is why the Israelites are not to sacrifice kanum to Jehovah. That would be absolutely, well, I guess, blasphemous to the Egyptians. We are not going to go through the entire chapter of Exodus 12, 13. There are many chapters that you would have to go and study for yourself. But allow me to highlight a couple of things so that at least it helps us guide our thinking. First of all, if you recall, the first month of the year on the 14th day, it will be the Passover or the killing of the Passover animal. And so the Lord spoke to Moses in the land of Egypt saying, this month shall be the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Meaning, we are now changing the calendar. And right now, this month, the month of Nisan, this month, Nisan, also called Aviv, the spring, will be the beginning of months, the head of months. All right, this is basically what God is saying. This is the head of months, and this would be the first of the month. So the head is the first. And out of the 12 months, this will be the first month now, the month of Nisan. And this month is a special month because this is the month that they will always remember they are leaving Egypt. And so there are rules. Notice when God says this month is the beginning of months, they must be able to tell. And every day starts from sundown or sunset, and they are able to count the days, right? From sunset to sunset, sunset to sunset. How about months? When there is a full moon, that would be the middle of the month, the 14th evening. And that would be corresponding very closely to all the ancient calendars like the Chinese calendar. And then God says on the 10th of the month, you do this. And you take for yourself, unfortunately, this word. This word in verse 3 is not lamb. The word is se. Right? The word is se. And it means a flock. So it says on the 10th of the month, you go and take yourself an animal from the flock. And I would say that the word lamb is a mistranslation, a complete mistranslation. And the idea here is you need to have one, well, again, this word here, verse 3, again, this would be a flock, an animal from the flock for the household, right? If the household is too small for the flock, let him and his neighbors share it and then take into account, right? And verse 5 is important. And so verse 5 says this, your lamb, again, your say would be your animal from the flock, has to be these conditions without blemish. Without blemish means it cannot have any cuts, any wounds, any injury. It cannot be blind, right? It has to be perfect. That's the word here. Complete or perfect. And now you see that it has to be a male within the first year, meaning it cannot be a female, right? There is no female from the flock. God wants only a male. And it cannot be old. It has to be within the year. And then you may take from the, notice here, from the sheep or from the goats. And this is what we mean by the flock. Because these are little four-legged animals that run together and they are flocking together. And God is saying, just pick an animal, whether it is a sheep, in this case, in verse 5. And the word sheep, it's also not a correct word. So let me just bracket this. This would be ram. Why? Because it is with reference to a male type of sheep, right? And then the word goats is also not exactly the correct word. It would be a he-goat. Now notice, God doesn't want any females here. So only the male ram, and you notice sheep, which is male, are called rams. Goats that is male is called a he-goat. And they all have horns, and you can tell them by the horns. And then you just keep them aside until the 14th day. And so specific time, same month, the first month, you come together at twilight and kill it. And that is what it is commonly called the Passover, or the killing of the animal of the Passover. And then you take the blood, you put it on the doorpost and the lintel of the house, and you eat the flesh that night, roasted with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs, and you eat it. Now, understand this. Why specifically a ram or a he-goat? So if you remember Canum, it is a male, right? It is a male head of a male sheep called a ram, or a male goat called a he-goat, and the head is Canum. And so if Israelites are to kill any of these, what would that symbolize? It would be symbolizing the killing of the god of the Egyptians. What would happen if the Israelites kill the god of the Egyptians before their eyes? And so Moses in chapter 8, verse 25 and 26 says that if that would be the case, won't the Egyptians stone us or throw stones to kill us? And the answer is absolutely yes. In our modern day equivalent, it would be tantamount to going to India, where some of the people treat the cows as a god, and then you kill them before their eyes, and that would create absolute chaos. And so the Israelites knew that they can't. And so why did God now tell them, kill it anyways? And the reason being is that God is testing the Israelites to see if they would trust God to deliver them, or they are afraid of the Egyptians killing them, that they dare not do what God says. And that would be the test of the Passover at this point in time. Now, there are a number of instructions. So you can go back and read. You can't eat it raw. You must roast it in fire. You can't boil it at all, right? Everything. Eat it all, right? And eat it with a belt on your waist. You are in a hurry now, basically. And it says, it is the Lord's Pesach. All right? Pesach. Now, let me explain this word to you. In verse 11, when it says it is the Pesach to Jehovah, it literally means the idea of Pesach really is to hop on one foot or to skip over. I guess when we were children, I'm not sure whether you played this game where you have a squares on the ground and it's in the symbol of a T, and you jump on one leg. That would be Pesach, to hop on one foot. And so this is the Lord's pesach means God is going to hop over. And that is what Passover means. God is going to hop over their homes when he is coming in to execute judgment on both man and beast against all the gods of Egypt. And it began on this night when the Israelites killed a ram or a he-goat. That would be the first significant strike at the Egyptian gods. And then later on, God will come by and kill all the firstborn. And that means that God is striking at the God of life, Pharaoh himself. The blood shall be a sign for you on the houses, so that when God sees the blood, why is it important to see? Because it is there on the doorpost and on the lintel. And when God sees it, look at what it says. I will pass over you. In verse 13, when it says, I will pass over you, the word pass over you means to pasak over you, to hop or skip over you. And so that the plague will not strike you when God strikes the land of Egypt. Now, that is the very purpose of the Pesach. And so by this means of killing all the firstborn of man and beasts and striking at the very life of Egypt, God will execute judgment. And says, this is important because all through scripture, whenever you read, I am the Lord, it's Ani Jehovah. It is a declaration that I am God, I can do it, I will judge, and I am judging. And so when God sees the blood, he will hop over you and you will not be destroyed. Now, I want to point out to you these couple of things, and so that we understand why Passover is so important to Israel. This day, the Passover, shall be a memorial to you, and you shall keep it as a feast. Now, in verse 14, it says that you will have to keep it as a feast, and this word feast is Hag, a celebration to God throughout your generations, means it is a perpetual celebration. You shall keep it as a feast by an everlasting ordinance, right? Perpetual. This is an A and this is a B. It's saying the same thing twice. So one of the most important thing is this is a memorial, and memorial basically means it's something to remember. Remember God's power. Remember God's deliverance. Remember what God did. And it is all about God doing it. And they did nothing except to demonstrate that they do not fear the God Khnum of Egypt. They fear Jehovah, the God of Israel. That is the Passover. And it's a test. And then it says, remove the leaven, right? You eat unleavened bread. And again, this word on is by. So it has to be done before the first day to remove all leaven from the house. Verse 15, leaven is really leaven, the material itself. And whoever eats unleavened bread from the first till the seventh, that person shall be cut off from Israel. You see how serious it is? Like what God gave the Sabbath ordinance to Israel, God gave the Passover. It has a death penalty, right? Unleavened bread means anything of leaven. And so it is important that they observe this. And so they make sure that they clean the house and they make their leaven gone. They would throw it out, they sell it away. They would remove the pots and pans and all the utensils that uses leaven and contain leaven. And they would make sure that there's nothing else there. And there is a reason. The unleavened bread is to tell them that they are in a hurry. They are also not to do anything to the bread because God will do the rest. They are to depend on God. The strength of the leaven on the bread must not be present. And so leaven is absolutely a no-no at this point in time. And just to be clear, on the 14th, and then the 15th, and then to the 21st. And this will be 7 days. This is 1 day. And so all in all, you have a period of 8 days here. And on the 14th day, meaning from sunset to sunset, what is going to happen is this. Here, kill the Passover. Here, eat the Passover. And it so happened to coincide with the first day of unleavened bread. And so it is very important to realize that the day they left Egypt is on the 15th. The day they crossed, and in the morning, they left Egypt. That was why they're in such a hurry, and the bread has no time to rise. And God says, you cannot have leaven, you only eat matzah. You are in a hurry, don't touch the bread. The bread must not have any chametz. And that's chametz. Chametz is leaven. And it cannot have, because that is strength added to the bread. And so nothing goes into the bread. Think of it. The power that you will see all through this period of time will be the strength of the hand of God. And that is where the unleavened bread is eaten. And this entire period is a period of 8 days. Very, very important. And so that in itself is the culmination of the unleavened bread. And so it's that important. All right. Now, let me explain a couple of things. I would like to bring us to one more part before we go and discuss the modern day efforts. And that would be in Deuteronomy chapter 16. I would encourage all of us to go back and study the book of Deuteronomy chapter 16. And it begins by reviewing the Passover. And notice, the animal they sacrifice is now properly translated here from the flock and the herd. In the place where the Lord chooses to put his name, and that would be the place where God appoints for them to have the sacrifice. First, it was Shiloh when they got in to across the Jordan. Then it would be Jerusalem. And Jerusalem was the final place where the temple was to be built. And this is the whole crux of the matter in Deuteronomy 16. And so you cannot have the Passover anywhere except at the place which the Lord your God gives you. This is where God chooses to make his name abide. You shall sacrifice the Passover there at the going down of the sun at the time you came out of Egypt. So notice, on the 14th of Nisan, and you do it where his name abide, Jerusalem. And initially it was Shiloh. As when they came out of Egypt. And so that is important, right? And so is it important then to say, oh, well, if we can't do it in Jerusalem, why don't we do it somewhere else? And the answer is no. In this chapter, I want to draw your attention to verse 16. It says, 3 times a year, all your males shall appear before the Lord your God in the place which he chooses, Shiloh or Jerusalem. There are 3 particular feasts: the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the Feast of Weeks, which is Shavuot, and we will do that next week, and the Feast of Tabernacles, Sukkot. And all of these is so important that it's 3 times a year, and God is saying, it's not that difficult, isn't it? I only need you to come to me 3 times, and I only want the males. Right? The males shall appear, and they come to the tabernacle or the temple, and they will not come empty-handed. They have to come with sacrifices of what the Lord your God has given to you. And notice this word, as he is able. And so it is a willing, free will sacrifice and offering to God, a thanksgiving as well. And so we will then look at the other few, like the Feast of Weeks and the Feast of Tabernacles, next week. So today you can see the first of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and with that you shall also read the word Passover into it, because it is part and parcel of the 8 days. And it's joined together, right? Passover and unleavened bread are joined together. And so this becomes the important key point for us. It is an appointment. It is not an option. And they must do exactly, clean the place, no leaven, eat with matzah. Now, let me briefly explain to you what they do today. At the time of the Pesach Seder, this would be the Pesach Seder. That would be the order of the Passover meal. They have, as I was told, so I'm just sharing with you what I have been told, right? They have 3 pieces of matzah, unleavened bread. 3. Why 3? And so let me just briefly explain to you why 3, and as I know it, right? There are 3, and they've been practicing this as a tradition for a long time, because there is Aaron, Moses, and the congregation of Israel. And they represent the Kohen, which is the priest, and the Levites, and the people. And so they would break 3 matzahs to represent. So it's symbolic of 3 groups of people that is key to the Passover: Aaron, Moses, and the congregation of Israel. 3 matzahs. In this same Seder, there are 4 cups. Now, I'm just sharing with you why they have 4 cups. And each of the cup is representative of the same concept. And so let me just highlight as we go through Exodus chapter 13. And as they go through each cup, they would read these words. The first cup is in verse 3. And it says this: "For by the strength of the hand of the Lord brought you out of this place." And they remember God, and in each of the cups. So this is the first cup. In verse 9, you see the second cup. "For with a strong hand of the Lord has brought you out of Egypt." And so they drink from the second cup, and they remember this, and they read. The next one is in verse 14. And verse 14 says, "By the strength of the hand of the Lord brought us out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage." And that will become the third cup. And verse 16 is the fourth cup. For by the strength of the hand of the Lord brought us out of Egypt. And so today, when they have the Seder, the Pesach Seder, that's some of the practices that they have inherited from all the years throughout the ages. And so in the Feast of Unleavened Bread, it is always unleavened bread. So it doesn't change. Now, what has happened that what I've shown you is this. I want us to really remember that this is very much, how should we say? This is an observance that is throughout the generations. And it doesn't break, which means that throughout the generations, they will keep doing it. But they're not doing it today, mainly because there is no temple, so there is no sacrifice. But they still have a seder, right? No lamb on the table. But they have bitter herbs. They have the seder with the cups, and they have the matzah. And I'm sure I'm not familiar with whatever else they've got, since I'm not a Jew, not participated in that. And so that's how they commemorate the Passover and then the unleavened bread as a memorial. And that would be important. So let me just highlight this as a memorial right here. In verse, as we close, so shall you observe the unleavened bread on the same day. That would be the 15th. That's the day they ate the Passover, that I will have brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Observe this day throughout your generation as an everlasting ordinance. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month at the evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month. So this is important for us to remember throughout your generations as an everlasting ordinance. And this is olam. Just like yesterday, that it was an everlasting covenant with regards to the Sabbath, the Passover and unleavened bread is also perpetual through the ordinance, an everlasting statute. And with this, we come to the end of today's topic.